The Killing Joke was always canon. That's a fact from the Batman history in 1988. Welcome to the Modern Bat, where we take a look at the history of Batman since 1986. Today we're taking a look at 1988, arguably the single most important year in the history of the Batman comics. And the reason for that is because 1988 saw the publication of The Killing Joke and A Death in the Family, two of the most important comic books in history. But before talking about them, let's take a look at the other things that happened to the Batman history in 1988. This was the year that Catwoman got her first miniseries ever. Writer Mindy Newell and artist Joe Brosowski created this book as a sequel to Batman Year One, but they focused exclusively on Catwoman, developing her backstory and giving her a new angle as a thief and an anti-hero. Another big change was the introduction of special annual comics for Detective Comics, and the first Detective Comics annual was written by Denny O'Neil as part of a trilogy alongside the Green Arrow and the Question annuals. The story in this annual is called The Monkey Trap, and it perfectly captures just who is the true Batman. Likewise, the Batman Annual number 12 features a backup story illustrated by Norm Breyfogle, who was the main artist in Detective Comics for all of 1988. Having created The Ventriloquist and The Rat Catcher, the creative team of Norm Breyfogle and writers John Wagner and Alan Grant introduced The Corrosive Man and Cadaver. But shortly after that, John Wagner quit Detective Comics. Grant and Breyfogle remained as the main creative team in Detective Comics for all of 1988, creating new and strange villains like Cornelius Stirk. And those are all the nice things that happened. 1988 is really known for being an awful year for Batman and his allies. The lesser of all evils happened in Batman: The Cult, a 4-part miniseries in which Batman is completely broken by an evil preacher called Deacon Blackfire. In The Cult, Batman is captured by this new villain, and he is taken to the sewers where he is starved and only fed drugs to make him an obedient servant of Blackfire. Never before in history had Batman been so defeated and humiliated. But of course, by the end of the story, he gets back on his feet and defeats the enemy. The second half of The Cult plays out as a carbon copy of The Dark Knight Returns, with monster Batmobiles included. Not quite original, but on the plus side, the story was illustrated by the master Bernie Wrightson, and it's really a pleasure to watch his Batman art. Now, this is also one of those rare occasions in which Jason Todd gets some time in the spotlight and is properly written, which is surprising, coming from the writer who hated Jason Todd, the author of this miniseries and the main Batman writer of 1988, Jim Starlin. Jim Starlin and Jim Aparo started their Batman run in 1987, and 1 year later, they delivered the most controversial Batman storyline of all time. The Batman comics began 1988 with the ending of the storyline 10 Nights of the Beast, which saw Batman confronting the deadly Russian agent, the KG Beast, and leaving him to die by trapping him in the sewers. A disturbing moment in the history of Batman, because it is so completely and utterly out of character. However, this was an error that was fixed later on by other writers. What couldn't be fixed, though, was the treatment that Jason Todd was given during the Jim Starlin Batman run. In 10 Nights of the Beast, Jason was barely even seen, and whenever he showed up, he didn't do much other than being there. And after 10 Nights of the Beast, Jim Starlin set out on a quest to destroy Jason Todd's reputation. In the following issues of Batman, Jim Starlin wrote the most unsympathetic version of Robin ever. Nowadays, it is not a secret that Jim Starlin didn't like Jason Todd at all, but back then nobody had a clue of the extent of this hate. A few months after 10 Nights of the Beast, DC Comics started the final Batman storyline featuring Jason Todd. Jim Starlin came up with the idea of a final story in which Robin was eliminated by Batman's greatest enemy, the Joker. The story is called Batman: A Death in the Family. Published in the late 1988, A Death in the Family was promoted by the Batman editor Denny O'Neil, who came up with the idea of leaving Robin's fate to the readers, giving them a chance to vote for the outcome of the storyline. This worked both as a publicity stunt and a scapegoat in case the idea backfired. According to the official accounts, the readers decided that Jason Todd should not survive his encounter with the Joker, and so the second Robin was killed. This change was meant to be permanent, but DC Comics couldn't foresee the uproar this turn of events would cause. The media was up in arms against DC and the Batman department for letting the boy wonder die. Denny O'Neil was considered guilty of this atrocity, and Jim Starlin officially ended his 2-year run in Batman just one issue after the storyline was finished. A Death in the Family is certainly a landmark in the comic book history, and the details surrounding this controversial story are just as fascinating now as they were back then. This is one of the darkest chapters in the history of Batman, but what makes it even more poignant is that it was published only a few months after another tragic event in the Batman history. In the early months of 1988, a graphic novel was published. It was written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Brian Bolland. The story is called Batman: The Killing Joke, and it is the definitive Joker story. Taking inspiration from classic comic books of the Silver Age, this graphic novel explores the possible origin story of the Joker. The characterization of both Batman and the Joker are quite complex, and it gives a new meaning to their relationship, while the dark plot makes for a fascinating story to read. However, the reason why this book has achieved a legendary status is because of all the myths and urban legends surrounding it. For instance, a lot of people believe that at the end of the story, Batman kills the Joker, and that's why it is called The Killing Joke. This theory comes from the final panels, where Joker stops laughing off-panel and the silhouette of Batman is seen reaching out to his enemy. People think that this means that Batman is choking Joker, and that the reason his laughter stops is because Batman has killed him. This is a theory that is supported by popular comic book writers like Grant Morrison. However, Morrison has nothing to do with The Killing Joke, so he is the least qualified person to speak about this book. The truth is that nothing happened. Alan Moore himself has explained on various occasions that he wrote the ending as a cathartic moment shared between two individuals who realize they are trapped in an endless cycle. This brief moment of sanity is represented with the symbol of insanity, a fit of uncontrollable laughter. But beyond that, there's nothing more to it. There is not a single mention about Batman killing Joker in the original script. But rumors spread very fast, and with this theory comes another, one that says that The Killing Joke was originally a story set in an alternate universe. But because it proved to be so successful and popular, DC Comics decided to make it canon. And that is absolute and total rubbish. The Killing Joke was always meant to be canon. There are references to the story in the main Batman comics during A Death in the Family, which was published only a few months after The Killing Joke. But perhaps the strongest case against this myth comes with another book, one that was published the same month as The Killing Joke, and that is the Batgirl Special. The darkest thing about The Killing Joke is the shooting of Barbara Gordon. As a result of this injury, Barbara was permanently confined to a wheelchair with no possibilities of recovering. This, of course, meant that Barbara could no longer be Batgirl, and soon she adopted a new identity as Oracle. However, this change didn't happen just because of the popularity of the Killing Joke. DC Comics was prepared to take Batgirl out of the picture. They made plans preemptively because they knew beforehand what would happen to Barbara. Knowing the outcome of the Killing Joke, DC Comics hired Barbara Kessel to write a special comic that worked as the last Batgirl story. The Batgirl special was published only a week before the Killing Joke, and in the story Barbara Gordon officially retires as Batgirl. The writer of this book has gone on record multiple times to say that DC Comics hired her specifically to set up Barbara Gordon and her new status quo after the Killing Joke. And that, my friends, is why the Killing Joke was always canon, and also why 1988 is one of the most important years in the history of Batman. The Killing Joke and A Death in the Family, two iconic and groundbreaking stories published the same year, and both of which brought permanent changes to the Batman mythos. All the other developments of 1988 pale in comparison to these two stories that forever changed not only Batman, but comics in general. And that, my friends, will do for today's video. Let me know what do you think of all these in the comments down below. Also leave a like if you enjoyed it, and if you want to help me make more videos like this, then please check out my Patreon. You can also follow me on Twitter @Salazar. Friends, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.